I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nation people as the traditional custodians of the land, and for this episode in particular, the Palawa people. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
And they just bring you into a family. You feel like you're part of the family, and I give them everything that I can to make the ciders the best that I can for them. It's actually very humbling, and I'm very proud.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale.
Kirk McDonald has the exciting role of making cider at Willie Smith's in Tasmania's Huon Valley, Australia's first certified organic cider. Willie Smith is a true orchard-to-bottle process, and the taste experience is unlike anything you've sipped before. Hi Kirk, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, Shanteh.
How are you feeling down in Tassie at the moment? Is it absolutely freezing?
No, it's a beautiful day. There's just a little wisp of wind and blue skies and sun shining. It's beautiful.
Oh, that sounds lovely. Now tell me a little bit about growing up in Darwin, and then how did you find yourself into the cider business?
It's quite a long story, but I come from a Navy background. My father was in the Navy and travelled all around Australia. And I ended up in Strathalbyn in my last few years of high school in South Australia, near Langhorne Creek. And socialised and grew up with a lot of fourth, fifth generation families in Langhorne Creek growing grapes and making wine. And I joined the Navy, followed my father. I didn't drink alcohol as a kid. Didn't like it at all. And when I left the Navy, I thought about what I wanted to do with my life, and ended up going to university in Adelaide and making wine, learning to make wine, and made wine. And along the way, I discovered cider and ended up in Tassie.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you weren't drinking alcohol as a kid. But I mean, I think that we've all had that experience of having a sip of mum and dad's beer or something and thinking, what is all the fuss about? But the moment for you changed when you drank a Chardonnay, is that right?
Yes. Well, I'd grown up, there was red wine around the house and Dad drank red wine. And I was, as you said, I was like, what is the fuss with this stuff? It's disgusting. And even beer at parties, it's like, not really into this. And during the Navy, I learned to drink rum, as all good sailors do. And eventually I found my taste buds, I suppose, matured, and I started drinking wine. And, Dad was buying the wine, so I drank it with him and got a taste for it. But I didn't really like white wine, and I didn't like the acidity of it. And during O Week, orientation week at university, we tasted some trophy winners from the Adelaide Wine Show, and there was a Kate Mantell Chardonnay there, and I quickly learnt what all the fuss was about and fell in love, and to this day I still love Chardonnay.
Oh, that's good to hear, because I love Chardonnay too, so we can agree on that point. And then tell me a little bit about your experience with the Cooper's Sparkling.
Well, I grew up in South Australia, so Cooper's is kind of an iconic drink to have. Very much the drink of choice at university. But prior to that, I found Cooper's Sparkling on tap in Sydney, and I tried it. And at the stage, I didn't really have a very developed sense of taste, but I thought it was quite fruity. And I was still sort of trying to work out what I like to drink as a young adult. And I saw cider on the shelf, and I thought, well, cider's kind of fruity, and I like Cooper's Sparkling, so I drank, of all things, Scrumpy Jack, and that opened my eyes to cider. So,
I think I remember my first taste of cider as well, and when we say cider, I think it's hard to it falls into this same category, but there is a huge realm of differences between excellent cider and terrible cider, in my opinion. But we'll get to that a bit later. Tell me a little bit about Tassie, because, Tassie has the name the Apple Isle, and apples have been grown in Tasmania for quite some time, haven't they?
Yeah. Well, William Bligh planted 7, I've only just learned this myself, but William Bligh planted 7 apple trees on Bruny Island in 1788, and the Huon Valley is the perfect climate for growing apples, and they grow really well here. And so apples spread more as a food source than having the pleasure of making cider out of. And there was thousands of apple orchards in Tassie, and that's where it sort of became known as the Apple Isle. And then through the years, like a lot of agricultural industries, there's boom and bust, and apple orchards declined, and the government actually gave growers money to leave the industry. Now there's, I think, only about 20 growers left in Tasmania.
Wow. I mean, I suppose, there are so many different agricultural products that do well, and not everybody can have an apple orchard. But as I said, cider's come such a long way in Australia. How have you seen the industry and the ciders change over the time that you've been involved?
So like a lot of Australians, I suppose, when you think of cider, you first think of Strongbow and Mercury. And although they're, great products, there's technically nothing wrong with them, but cider has a lot more to offer than just those styles. And we've got a lot of heritage apples in the Huon Valley, varieties such as Kingston Black and Yarlington Mill, which provide, as an eating apple, they're not that great. In fact, most people wouldn't enjoy them at all. But they make these very, very interesting ciders with not only the apple characters, aromas and flavours, but there's these tannins and acids that are simply amazing. And it's quite akin to wine varieties. Everything's in the apple that's there to make a great cider.
Yeah, I mean, I think they call them spitter apples, don't they? With the kind of bitterness and astringency that you get off some of those apples. I may or may not have stolen into an apple orchard once to pick just an apple for myself, and I think it must have been not at a culinary apple grower. And I remember, the joke was on me because I just had this dry, tannic mouth and this puckering, soured face, and I was like, oh my God, that was not what I was hoping for.
Yeah, I had that experience when I first came down to Willie Smith's and was tasting through some of the components made from different varieties, and there's a variety called Frecken Rouge, which we affectionately just called Freckers, and it is just a tannin monster. But the balance and palate weight that you can get from that variety is simply amazing. And when I first tasted it, it blew me away, and my mind just started racing. It's like, if I put a bit of this with a bit of that, and I was just amazed. So, in the wine industry, people are adding tannins to their ferments and produce and their finished wines to get the tannin profile, but it's already there in these apple varieties.
Yeah, and I think that whatever you want to call it, but even like that element of bitterness, it plays such an important role. We know in things like perhaps Amaros, but we don't always talk about it in such a friendly way when it comes to adding something to a finished product, but it's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And we pretty much divide heritage apples into bitter sweets and bitter sharps. They both add a bitter character, and some varieties, like a Sturma Pippin, for instance, has quite a sharp, acidic character to it. And, a bitter sweet has the sweet balance. So if you're blending the two together, you can end up with quite an interesting drink.
Definitely interesting and definitely delicious. I think Willie Smith was one of the first ciders that I tried that wasn't from France that I was like, oh my gosh, now this is right up my alley. Being somebody that loves kind of acidity but doesn't like the kind of sickly sweet ciders that I'd perhaps tried in the past, can you give me a bit of an understanding of what the whole orchard to bottle process means with Willie Smith?
Yeah, so I'm in a very lucky position where I work for a family, fourth generation growing apples, and having an amazing orchard literally at my back door, right next to the press and the cidery. So I can go out and look at the orchard, look at the apples, and make a picking decision. Then and there is some differences with processing apples to grapes, and we do a thing which we call sweating the apples, where we just allow them to sit and intensify, and then we process them. So we're processing the juice, and almost everything we do is organic, and we make the apple juice here on site. We ferment it through. We package it on site here. And so everything's within our control in the Huon Valley. Which is
wonderful. It means you're not, relying on, hold-ups for packaging or what else, having to ship off the juice in temperature-controlled vats, and waiting on that process. It really means that you can be really detailed in all the elements. The Smith family's in their fourth generation now. What's it like working for a family with such a rich history in the area?
It's actually a very emotional thing for me to be working for a fourth generation family, and anyone that's met Andrew and Ian, I think would share the same sentiments as me, and that they're just salt of the earth, genuine people. The generations have been through boom and bust, and Andrew's father, Ian, went through two significant rebuildings of the business due to bushfires, and then when Britain joined the European common market, the export for export. I'm going to say this a few times: grapes and wine export for apples dried up, so he had to rebuild the business, and then Andrew came along. He'd been off and seen the world, and Andrew's passion is sailing. He's a very high level sailor, and he'd seen some organic orchards and organic way of doing things overseas and intensive planting, and he brought those back to Ian, and they had some discussions over it, and it's commonly referred to as the blue that they had, but Andrew then took us into an organic phase, which wouldn't have been popular at the time. People would have thought you're a hippie or something along those lines. But he saw the future, and here we are today. He's one of the largest organic apple growers in the country, and each generation has brought their own. It's quite emotional for me. I'm very, very proud to work for them.
That's wonderful to hear, and I imagine when it is family-run business, you are emotionally invested in them, and it must be really humbling to feel a part of their story.
Yeah, it is, and Andrew's just such an approachable guy, and you see Ian still strolling around, having a look, but he's kind of retired, but he's still around the place, and I can go to Andrew with anything. When I first moved down here, Andrew said, "Don't you buy a house without you telling me about it first." And they just bring you into a family. You feel like you're part of the family, and I give them everything that I can to make the ciders the best that I can for them. It's actually very humbling, and I'm very proud.
That's awesome. How did you feel when you first moved down to Tassie? Were you hesitant or were you excited for the move?
I was very excited. We had, my partner and myself had discussed making Tassie our home, and when I first came down here, I had a look around and met Andrew. Andrew spent the whole day with me, and that was quite incredible. He showed me all his orchards and his different varieties, and he's got a new variety called Southern Bliss, which he had planted up, which is he has the rights to. Put me down to the Huon River and showed me that, and and spent a lot of time with me. Had lunch, and halfway through the day, I just said to my partner, because they interviewed her as well, and it had to be right for both of us. And I just said to my partner, I found my people. This is where we belong. Like I know that I've got the technical skills to make cider really well for them, but I feel like I belong here. And I've heard that from a number of people that have come and worked for the Smith family.
That's amazing. I think that's wonderful that they interviewed your partner, because as everyone knows, it takes a team effort, and if your partner's unhappy and you're in the job of a lifetime, that really pulls you in two different directions.
Yeah, it does. And she's actually on her way in now to have, an afternoon drink with everyone that's still here. And I've spent the morning looking at some brandies and a couple of new products and blending, and I've left them out so that I can show her what I do day to day. And I mean, that's a bit of a kick for her. But as much as Andrew said to me, if there's anything that I need when I started, like if there's anything that my partner needs, he's there for her as well.
Oh, the perks of the job. Someone's got to sit down and taste the fruits of your labour, and I feel like that's a nice place to be. I want to talk a bit about the Willie Smith range, because it made a lot of sense when I first started tasting them, because it reminded me almost of a model of a winery in terms of having something there for everybody, but then also having these special releases and kind of limited editions as well. Can you walk us through kind of the offerings?
Yep. So we have our core range and some seasonal releases that come out in cans. We have a canning line on site. And we have our organic, which that's what we call it, organic, and it's our biggest seller. We also keg on site as well. And it's pretty much made using dessert apples. So it's a mixture of Pink Lady, Fuji and Gala. And, we blend it up to be, sort of the introduction, the beautiful apple flavours, but also quite approachable and, not finishing with an astringent or tannic flavour or acidic flavour. Then we have our bone dry, which is, as the name says, is bone dry. We don't add any juice back to it to make the balance more sessionable and flavoursome. And it's for people that really like that bone dry, acidic style of cider. We have what we call our traditional, which has a percentage of cider apples added to it, which is sort of a step up from the organic and is an introduction to the flavours and more so the tactile sensation in the mouth of what heritage and traditional apples provide. What else do we do? We've just introduced a non-alc, which is a very new product, but it's extremely popular. And we used our access to heritage apples to still create something that tasted very much like a cider with no alcohol. So that's very, very popular. And we do a seasonal, which is a sour, and we use a Sturma Pippin apple for that, which he's it's a heritage apple, but it's got a strong Australian and Tasmanian connection. And a lot of growers have that because it flowers for a long time and enables cross-pollination of apples that flower early, or trees that flower early and trees that flower late. What else do we do? For our limiteds, so that's under review every year. We have some mainstays. So it's kind of like in the wine industry, a best of vintage. We have our heritage, which is our icon product, which we won Australian Cider Awards Best in Show with in 22. And we have our Kingston Black, which is a single variety offering every year. We do that. And then this year we'll probably do a single variety of Yarlington Mill. And it's really there to showcase what single varieties and cider apples are all about. And going back to our heritage, this is the best that we can do. We throw everything that we possibly can at making this, and it's from a single grower in Franklin in the Huon Valley that has a number of heritage varieties, and that's all he does, and grows them very, very well. And we make our heritage blend from that. And then we do a keeving product, which is an old technique that involves the pectin in apples locking up the nutrients and pretty much starving the ferment from finishing, and creates quite a unique flavour profile. It's a very interesting cider to make because it looks absolutely terrible during the process. And the assistant cider maker, that's his baby, and I give him his head with it, and he loved making it. It's his baby, and he almost looks at me, "Don't go near my keeve." It's a very, very interesting product.
I love that there's so much to the portfolio. I've poured the Willie Smith heritage blend out of the 750, and I loved it because I was like, it's one of those drinks where you have a little bit and you want more. So serving it in like that 750 larger bottle, it would disappear before my eyes. And I just remember the Soms at the end of the night would be like, is there any of the Willie Smith flat? Because I'll have it flat over ice, and they would pour the dregs of it because everybody wanted to have that last sip of it. So I love that it's served in that larger format bottle.
Fantastic to hear, and I think that Willie Smiths have so much to offer that if you haven't tasted cider or unique Australian cider, then the core range is a stepping stone. It can show you what can be done, and then our limiteds, which we commonly refer to as our playground. They're not very big quantities because obviously they're limited. But it's our playground. It's where us cider makers get to experiment and try things new.
And I think that the possibilities for cider at a dining table haven't quite been realised, in my opinion, because I really think that these drinks are so complex. And, like you said, there's those fruity elements to the core range, which is just absolutely delicious, refreshing, everything you want out of crunching into an apple. But some of the other ranges, they're so detailed and they really can kind of work through an entire meal from entree to main course to kind of dessert and after. Yes.
Recently I did a collab with a restaurant here down at, I think it's Princess Wharf. Aloft is the restaurant, and we did a cider matching course or degustation, I suppose, with them. And they use both cider in their cooking and also as, accompaniment. And that was a huge hit. opened people's eyes to, I can drink cider with my meal just like people drink wine with their meal. Because there is the tannin profile and the acid profile there that can stand up to big steaks or large dishes or something that matches to pasta. So they're just as versatile as wine.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that also just even glassware choice. I know with the barrel, brandy aged, the barrel cider that you have, I used to serve that in a Pinot Noir glass because it just kind of changed over time, but it had so much going on. It really needed to kind of have that big bulbous kind of glassware to show it off.
Yes, absolutely. And, that's the difference between drinking something out of the can. You don't really get to see it open up and evolve. Although I have seen people pouring organic into glasses and going, oh, this is so much better out of glass. And, of course, when it's poured on draft, people go, oh, this is so good. But, yeah, I've had that same experience with, I'm going to use the term wine snobs. It's like, I don't drink cider. And then I show them some of our ciders and it's like, wow, unbelievable. And then they go away and start finding, the ciders that are in France and the UK, and know that we're doing this in Australia. It's a bit of a secret at the moment, and I can see cider really becoming a big part of people's drinks vocabulary in the future.
Especially as an adult drink. And I can't emphasize that enough, that it is such an adult drink. And I'm so excited that you did say you're doing a non-alcoholic version, because when I was pregnant, I was drinking a bit of sparkling apple juice because it was something that I could pour and kind of hide from people that went into a flute glass or whatever it was. But I remember thinking, I wish there was a more mature tasting sparkling apple juice that's non-alcoholic, because it was delicious, but, it didn't have kind of, the level of complexity. And so the fact you're doing that is so exciting, and you're using those heritage blends. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's really, as I said, that's really what made us able to make that product still taste not just like sparkling apple juice. As it, it's a drink. It just doesn't have the alcohol, and it tastes like cider. That said, it will be ranged in Woolies supermarkets pretty soon. So, that's a bit of a scoop for you.
Sure is. And great that people know where they can get it and pop it in their trolleys while they're doing everything else. Tell me a little bit about your midwinter festival, because that sounds delightful, and I'm just sad that I'm not going to be there to experience it.
Oh, it is. And this is, I think, our 10th anniversary. And it's just an amazing festival of, I suppose the marketing line is fire, feasting, the wassail ritual, and we have the big Burning Man, which is a sight to behold in itself. It's a steel structure of a man, basically, filled with straw that is set fire to in a bit of a ceremony, which we commonly refer to as just Big Willie. And it's basically a throwback to the days of warding off any disease and pestilence in the vineyard. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of people get dressed up. There's face painting. There's music and celebration. And something that really struck me about Tasmania when I first moved here was how friendly and genuine people are. And you see that in the festivals. You see it in Dark Mofo at the moment that's on. Everyone's just so friendly and happy to mingle and socialise, and it's really enjoyable. Drinking cider, of course.
Of course, the best part. I mean, I love the fact that, for me, Tassie definitely knows how to festival, that's for sure. But I always found that they know how to do lots of family-based outdoor entertainment. Like, all the markets you go to, you just see that everybody's there, and it's children and it's babies and it's your grandma and your grandpa, and it just really directed at everybody, and I love that.
Yes, that's very true. I worked our stall at Dark Mofo last Sunday, and so I got to see the range of people coming through, and I still haven't managed to use my phone to tap to pay for things, but I had ladies and gentlemen that are probably in their 80s using their phone to tap for their payment of their cider, and it just sort of made me realise that there's everything from the mum or dad pushing the pram through the crowds and people making way to little kids dressed up and enjoying themselves, and through to even the young people having the time of their life and probably still learning how much alcohol they should or shouldn't drink. There's still no bad behaviour, and it's just fun and safe.
Well, Tassie's certainly doing something right down there, and I don't know what the secret is, but maybe keep it for yourselves, because that's not always the case in other states. Kurt, I'd love to know, if you could drink only 3 beverages for the rest of your life, what would they be and why? Okay,
I've given this some thought previously. I'm a big fan of Saison DuPont. Beer. My special wine treat is champagne. As much as I love Chardonnay, a good champagne, and my go-to for that, it changes so much, but something that if I just had to have one champagne for the rest of my life, it'd probably have to be Billy Cart. And I just, it just ticks all the boxes for me. And then I would want a pallet's probably not big enough, but a refrigerated container of just the wide range of different ciders that are available from out the world, because I'm still learning about cider, and I think I always will. And just to, open just different ciders from, even just in France, just the number of different ciders that are available, and just for education purposes and learning. So,
yeah. Oh, I love that, because you're right, and some of those trees are ancient that they make those amazing ciders from. And you're right, I think that there's so much to learn, and isn't that exciting that it's, you don't get to a place where you can sit back and say we've done our best. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah, well, I'm sitting here now in the boardroom looking out at our vineyard and looking at the vineyard, at the orchard. I do that all the time, Shanteh.
I completely know what you mean, though. I'm picturing apples, but it made sense to me.
Looking at the orchard, and they've almost got characters. Each tree has a character of its own, and they're kind of just looking at me with no leaves at the moment, thinking, "Yeah, we're just going to have a rest for a while now. We'll be back."
Sounds good. And what's even more exciting is if I ever sneak down to Willie Smith's and try and, pop in for a little crunch on an apple, you do have some of those culinary dessert apples that I could pick off the tree, right?
Absolutely. And, because we're right onto major roads on the corner here, you do see tourists just stopping off and grabbing an apple straight off the tree. Yeah. So, but yeah, you're more than welcome to come down.
Well, very cheeky. I wouldn't do that now. I would definitely ask permission. I suggest you do that. But it was a long time ago. I think I was sub 18.
But if you're ever down this way, sure, come by and I'll show you through some orchards and through our cider range.
Oh, that sounds like a perfect day out. Kirk, it's been so lovely to hear a little bit about what you do. I'm such a long-time fan of all the range, and if you don't drink cider, then what the hell are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Shanteh, and have a great day.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Stay tuned for more stories from the world of wine and drinks. Listen in every Thursday on your podcast app. Follow us on Instagram at overaglasspod and contact us at overaglass@deepintheweeds.com.au.